Hey everyone, you're listening to the Active Turnkey podcast, a podcast designed for hands-off, passive real estate rental investors. In the Active Turnkey podcast, you'll hear Tom Olson and Jared Stoltmeister discuss all things turnkey rentals with other turnkey providers, service providers, and rental investors. Our goal is to help you reach your financial freedom and whatever comes after that. Let's go. Hey everybody, welcome back to the Active Turnkey podcast. I'm your host, Jared Stoltmeister, and I have with me actually, no, I don't. I'm sorry. Tom is not with us, and I don't have a guest. I don't have a special guest. It's just Jared Stoltmeister today. So hopefully that's enough for you guys. But thank you for joining us. And we are continuing our series on the Active Turnkey product. We call it the Active Turnkey series. And we're really getting granular here. We're trying to help people understand how we vet properties, how we get it to you, how we establish this, the processes that we go through. And if you want to do Active Turnkey on your own, you can do all these things. But these are the services that we provide to you, our customers. And so this is what we do. And the first couple episodes of this series, we've talked about, first of all, establishing ARV. And we talked about how important of a process that is. It seems to be obvious that you want to establish that after repair value. I am amazed at how many times people think they know the value of a property. And one thing I'm learning as an investor, whether you're doing rentals, and we sell properties here as well. So for us to know that what the value of the property is important. So like for me, the investor, Jared, of course I want to know that, but that changes, it fluctuates. And one thing you're going to want to know for sure is, just because a property you were aware of kind of the idea. So I do this as an investor myself. I'll go and someone will give me an area of a property. I'm like, okay, yeah, we sold some houses over there, a house this size, 3-1, 1,200 square feet, 140,000, rent 1,500, or 1,400, whatever the number may be. And because we have experience there and we can just start spitting it out, and experience helps in that situation. It really does. Just having an idea of what's happened in the area. And however, those things change, comps fall off, over time. And if you're not working in that little area, that quarter mile for 3 to 6 months, and it's been longer than that, and you go back in that area, you may find things change. One thing for me, whenever we have a property, we'll go in and we'll go through this whole process. We'll go through these steps when we're assessing a deal, and then we'll negotiate, we'll purchase the property, go into all that. After it's all said and done, we're going to rerun the numbers all over again. We're going to do it all over again. We're going to reassess the deal because things could have changed, especially when you're doing construction. Things change over time, and especially if you're doing fix and flip. This is not about fix and flip, but if you buy a property, it's taken, you're just going to hold the property longer. When you're flipping, a lot can change. And so for me, typically when a house is getting really close to finishing, we're approaching punch list time or something along that line. Once we get close to that punch list, I am asking our team to generate comps for me so I can rerun the numbers again. What is happening? I'll go and find out, are there new rent comps available? What is going on in that area? So establish your ARV. You definitely want to nail that down, and you want to make sure that those numbers are rock solid. And one thing that comes to mind too is, because you know what's going on in an area, you may say, oh well, the average price. So you'll look at deals, what's happening, and you'll see as a buyer, okay, generally speaking, houses in this area that at this size sell for this price. And I think that makes sense. It's a number, it's a gauge, it's a data point. However, most investors know that is not the way to buy. You don't buy based upon average sale price in an area, or in a quarter mile, in a pocket, in a subdivision. That can help and be a gauge, but every deal is different, and you want to make sure that you are running your numbers every time, doing the proper due diligence, don't miss steps. Don't hurry, and make sure you're hitting these numbers. So the first episode we talked about establishing ARV. Second episode we talked about determining rent. And again, I alluded to that a minute ago, but you definitely have to make sure that you know those numbers and what's going on in the area. And I mean, I've said this before, you're running through comps and initially before you go and verify them with what's happening in the market, I've made the statement, it has to be at least this much. It just has to be with what's going on in the market. And sometimes you'll be surprised. Maybe it'll be a lot more, or it could be less. There could just not be comps out there. And one thing to keep in mind, we were running comps recently in an area in our market, and one thing I realized is, man, there's not a lot of rent comps. So I'm really surprised by where the rent numbers are. But then I realized after looking through the comps that were available that they were not rehabbing them to our standard. So okay, well, that makes a lot more sense for that market. It was a C plus, B minus neighborhood, and maybe in a B neighborhood. And I'm like, okay, that makes a whole lot more sense that these people are not finishing to our standard. At that point, we may be setting a market in a way, but at least I have a reason to justify why I think our price should be higher for that rent. So anyway, you definitely want to go through there and determine your rent price, nail that down, because when you're determining a deal and you want to determine rental property, first of all, ARV, all other numbers go off of it. If you don't have that number, you can't do anything as far as any kind of formulas. And then secondly, you want to determine that rent. Third episode, we talked about estimating repairs, and they're all very cohesive. If you're trying to evaluate a deal, ARV, and then for rent numbers, and then estimating repairs. Those are all things you have to do. You just have to know what those numbers are. You have to know your standard. You have to know what you're going to do. You need to know the end product in mind. We talked about this last episode, but knowing the end product in mind, exactly what it's going to look like, so that you can compare and you can expect it to happen. You have your scope of work. And then again, all those three things come into something that you need all three, because now you're going to go into this next step. And that is, again, I would like to call this part of the Active Turnkey series, or what we're doing right now, this is all in due diligence mode. We're in underwriting. We're vetting a deal on paper. And I recommend you do this before you even go out to the property. We had one of our acquisition members today about to house their property. And I asked him, he said, I'm going to go out to this property. It was a little bit of a drive for us. It could be anywhere 45 minutes to an hour from our office. And I said, did you run the rent numbers? Did you run the pro forma? Did you run the numbers? And one thing we don't want to do is we don't want to send somebody out to an hour drive for them to spend another half an hour run through the property, taking pictures, getting their rough repair estimates, to find out that the deal never made sense anyway. That for some reason maybe taxes were too high or whatever that might be. Take your time. Go through and create all this stuff, and that includes running your numbers. So after you determine your ARV, establish rent, all that stuff, and get your repair number, now you're going to run the numbers. And there's several different things once you start inputting that, and all this is included in your pro forma. So whether you have a one like us that's it's nothing crazy, but it is a pro forma that we generate things. We pop the numbers in, and it spits out based on the formulas exactly what we need them to be for the information we need to know. And so we have a few things we have to know. And so I'm actually looking at our pro forma right now. And of course, in the Active Turnkey, there are several things you need to be aware of. You need to be aware of the LTV and things like that. We're getting into that. But the very first thing is you pop in the numbers. So in this case, I'm going to run through some of the things you need to know and input in to generate your rent. Is your cash flow, excuse me. So you're going to need to know your purchase price. What are you buying the house for? And this, again, as you're starting to figure things out and run through them, you need to know that what am I paying for the house, and then what is my cost for the rehab? You got to have those two numbers, okay? Like we said before, that's just elementary, okay? Then you're going to have a general idea of closing costs. That's going to be put in there because all that's going to come off at the end. You're going to have an idea on your property taxes, and that's a big one. That's a big one. And they vary. And so even recently I had an investor and I told him, Gary runs their taxes differently. If you buy a house in Hammond, Indiana, you're going to be at 2% of what you paid for it. Typically, market value. You're going to be, if you buy the house for 150, your taxes are going to be $3,000. It's going to be 2% of what you purchased. The market value is the assessed value. In Indiana, the taxes are based off the assessed value, and in a city like Hammond, they are on par with each other. They're very much on par, and that does not include any type of local community thing. They would have like a voter approved charge for a school or something on that line, and so that would be in addition to the tax. It's not a tax; it's a charge, but it does go on your annual tax. And so you're going to want to nail that number down. So for instance, there are times when there may be a voter approved charge. In Hammond, they just built a brand new school, combined high schools together into one. And I own a property in Hammond, and right now my annual voter approved charge is over $900. $900 a month. That's not my tax. That's just the voter approved charge. So that's in addition to. So if you're vetting a deal, that's $900. That can really hurt you, and it does go down over time, but it's something that's still there, and you need to account for it as you're running your numbers. And what you find is that could throw off your cash flow numbers as they should be. But you want to nail down your taxes, your annual taxes. You want to figure out. Let's see here. You want to have insurance. That's a monthly number. That's a monthly you want to pay insurance. Trust me, and especially on the upfront process while you own in cash, you're going to want to have that property have insurance there. But then when you refinance out, your lender is going to require that. But you're going to want to have insurance, and then also your property management fees. What is your property management charging? And if you're self-managing, that's fine, but you definitely want to allot for that. You also want to allot for, we try to allot for our utilities involved. Some people out there, they still do it. We don't do that. We make sure that in almost every case, the tenant pays for all utilities, but you may do that and you want to account for that. Do you have lawn care? Do you have lawn care, especially for multi-units? If you're doing multi-units and you have shared spaces, it's not right for them to try to figure it out themselves. That is going to be something you as the owner are going to have to do. So lawn care. Now, one thing we've done in the past is we've set up like fences or what have you, split it up, and then at that point, then sure, if there's obvious areas that the tenants have. Now you can save some money that way, some cash flow. Just put a fence down the middle, and they mow this side, they mow that side, and hey, great! You can eliminate your lawn care in that way. But for snow removal, same thing. If you have a shared driveway, a shared sidewalks, you're gonna have to take on that cost. So what is it? That's got to be in there. What are you running on average for those? That's all got to come into what your numbers, your costs going against your cash flow, and then your mortgage. Certainly, your mortgage payment's gonna have to be in there based upon today's interest rates. Projecting that down the line is going to be difficult, but you're going to want to have all that in there too. You're going to have your rent, your mortgage payment, and your estimated interest rates. And so we do try to keep them in line with what the market's saying, and we update that as often as we can. But those are things you're going to see in there, and all of this is helping to calculate your cash flow. And so the many more things there along that line. And so all that is going to come into your rent. Now, one more thing I might have mentioned before is you want to run your vacancy and maintenance. Figure out what that cost is. Typically, if you're acquiring a property that is closer to retail, like our product, a turnkey product, that the first year we guarantee the scope of work. And so everything in the scope of work, we guarantee that labor for that work. And so we would expect that cost to be dramatically lower that first year. And so what is that cost? And figuring out what your vacancy and maintenance numbers are, include that in there so you have your base cash flow number and then your after vacancy and maintenance cash flow number. And at the end, is that what you want it to be? And so you can also find out why you may not be making as much money on your property because you the very beginning when you were estimating your rent, it was off. You didn't estimate high enough, or maybe your repair's not nice enough. You didn't borrow enough money to make your house nice enough to get that max rent, and now you come into the end and you have all these fees that are coming in and costs, and by the time it all comes out, you're spitting out your cash flow and it's not near where you need it to be. And so figuring out all that stuff, you have to nail that down. And again, these steps are important. This is your desk assessment. You're trying to figure out, does this deal work? And so you want to make sure you're running all these numbers, and so that's kind of creating the pro forma, and that's going to generate your cash flow. Okay, and again, mortgage, lawn care, taxes, insurance, your property management fees, lawn care. Let's see here, what I say here: vacancy and maintenance, etc. Those are all things you're going to want to make sure are going into that. And then it spits out the cash flow number, which hopefully, if you're buying well, gets you at least over $200. That's our standard, $200 a month. And then, and if you're doing well enough, maybe more beyond that. With today's interest rates, a little bit lower than it used to be, but you guys are along with me. So that's the first thing on your pro forma. Are you hitting your cash flow goals? Number two, with Active Turnkey, you want to make sure you're aware of your LTV. Your loan to value. Your loan to value is just your percentage into the deal, okay? And that's your cash. So after it's all said and done, your conventional lenders will allow you to pull anywhere from 70 up to 75 and to 80% of your money out of the deal, okay? And so running your LTV number is basically, hey, what percentage of my own cash am I into the deal? And so you want to try to be, if you can, in that. If you can be under all that, that's great. And this gets into strategy. But typically speaking, we try to get our guys in between the 80 and 85% LTV range. And by doing that, we know that you only have about 5% of your own cash in the deal after refinance. So you get all the rest of it after your refi, and you have only into the deal, only that 5%. That's our goal for what we're doing. But you need to know that number. You need to know what that number is for sure. When you're running your pro forma numbers, you have to know what that is. If you're dealing with a little bit of money, that's fine. If you're using a lender, that's definitely something. It's a line item that's going to have to go on here that you'll have to be aware of. But you'll want to know where your numbers are because after you refinance their property, you might need to pay them. And you might not get all the money back you were expecting. And so know your LTV number for sure. You have to know what that number is. And again, for us, our goal is to get you under 85%. And so that's the Olson Group goal, or the One Group goal today. And so the next thing, we just try to pay attention to cap rates. Typically our goal for Turnkey is 8% or better, and we're trying to get the same thing again for your Active Turnkey deals. Another one we look at is a cash on cash returns. And so again, that's just your percentage of return based upon your income for the property, like cash flow after cost, your cash flow compared to your investment, or what you paid into the deal. And so again, when it comes to this, you want to run that number based off of your out-of-pocket expense after refinance. And so technically, you could make the argument that if you do everything perfectly in a BRRRR deal or Active Turnkey deal, that after it's all said and done, you do everything perfectly and you're into the deal less than 80%, and you pull out all that money. So basically you have $0 in a deal. You could argue that you now have an infinity return. Because you got every single dollar back and you're making more money. You're making X amount of dollars a month in cash flow, and you had $0 of your own deal after refinance. And so you can make the argument that your cash on cash return at that point would be an infinity return, which is pretty exciting because now you can redeploy and do it again, and you're using the same money to create infinity returns on those properties. That's where it gets really exciting. That's why we say the Active Turnkey is the best way to buy rentals. And then lastly, this one that, and there are other things we could have focused on today, but for this podcast, I wanted to focus on running your numbers. And the other thing I would just say is, the area grade, what's it look like? And, now, again, you haven't been in the property. You're assuming some of these things, and you might want to pop in the address and just do a quick Google search and see what's happening in your area. But these are things you are nailing down. You're finding out, does this deal fit? Does it even make sense? Am I even going to spend any time? Because you're going to take this information and you're going to want to verify all of it. This is just the base part. This is you just, again, a desk assessment, finding out, does this even fit a deal that I'm willing to go take the next steps, that I'm willing to go look at, that I'm willing to make an offer on? Will this make me money? Does this make sense moving forward? And so you run through this whole process. And then at the next point, once you get through this, now you can go and you can go to the property and you can, again, just because your ARV is this number and it spits out your max offer, naturally you don't have to start with a max offer. If you're trying to bid on your own, you can go lower. And so one of the benefits to buying with Olson Group, though, or one group that we've talked about before, is, and I mentioned this before, is, in this situation, you're establishing ARV, you're determining rent, you're estimating repairs, and then now you're going to start bidding. Okay, and in the open market, that could go back and forth, and you're competing against a seller. You're trying to, in the end, I like to say that they're trying to make as much money as they can, and they don't really care that you're trying to do BRRRR. They don't care that you're trying to do active turnkey. And really, neither should they. Why would they care? Why would they care that you're trying to do that? And so they're really trying to make as much money as possible. Likewise, the contractor. So you acquire the property, you get it under contract, and now you're like, hey, I want to go get an estimate created so I can get ahead of the game, so I'm ready to go. When the project starts, I can have a contractor ready to go and get him started day one. The contractor that goes in there, he doesn't care what you paid for it. He really doesn't care. And that could hurt you. That mindset can hurt you if you're in this massive acquisition mode and you stretch your purchase price, and then you get your contractor and you find out, oh wow, well let me minimize this, let me beat this down, let me shave. Now you're starting to chintz off your scope of work, which could affect all the other things, your value, your rent, all these different things. So your contractor, so the first thing, your seller doesn't really care what you paid for it, and then likewise, your contractor doesn't really care what you paid for it, and he shouldn't, and so they're separate from you. I like to think that with Olson Group, when we bring you a deal, we have thought through this whole process with the goal for you to be making money, for you to have cash flow. You have this cash on cash return, these cap rates, all these different things, these ones we talked about, these numbers we talked about. We want you to hit them. And in many ways, we have brought the deal, assessed it, and realized that what we want to make. So naturally, as a company, we want to be profitable. We want to be able to provide you deals long term. In order to do that, we need to stay in business. And so after we've assessed the deal, we've gone through it, we've run the numbers, and we've looked at the data, and we know where you need to be. We need to get you in at rent over $200. We need to get you minimum. We got to get you under 85% LTV. We got to have it, and along with these other numbers. And so after assessing that, we realize we can't sell this property. We can't make the numbers work for the investors the way they are. So what options do we have? The only option we have is to shave off our profit. We just have to make less. And so in the end, when we do that, there are times when I've brought a deal to an investor and I've just said bluntly, like, hey, here's this deal. It's tight for us on this end, and we're making less on the deal. And here's the irony. The irony is, again, initially you're competing against the seller in the first scenario and the contractor. In this case, we're bringing a deal to you and saying, oh, by the way, these numbers work for you. This is exactly what you're looking for. And by the way, we're actually making less than we'd like to be. No other seller does that. No other contractor will do that. And there are other perks that come with working with a company like us on that line. But just in general, like in the end, our goal is we need this deal to work for you. But number 4 on the Active Turnkey series, run your numbers. Run your numbers. Make sure you know them inside and out. Make sure you understand what they mean. Make sure that you're checking and double checking your formulas, and especially if you're doing things on paper. If you're creating a spreadsheet, make sure you have it right. Make sure you know it right. And then lastly, every investor is going to have their own thing. You're going to have your own goals, and you have to be okay with that. And also know that could give you opportunities and limitations for what you want to do. But run your numbers, make sure you know them, and that'll give you an idea moving forward. Is this even a property I want to touch? And if it is, now we get into the next section where the next episode we'll talk about going to the property and verifying everything you just discussed. Everything, the time you spent vetting the deal, you're just going to go and verify it. And that will be our next episode. Thank you for joining us today. We hope this brought you value. And hopefully the next couple episodes we'll get Tom in here, and then we'll get some real action going on. But if this brought you value, we would appreciate you to share it, like it, thumbs up, and all the things you could do for that. Also, remember, we do build rental portfolios for investors. So if you're looking to start building your portfolio or to come into a new market, you can reach me. Go to our website, and you can still use the buyolsongroup.com. You can still go to that if you need to, and or you can still email me at jared@buyolsongroup.com. But we do have new emails, new branding that's going to be rolling out here shortly. And but if you're interested in doing that, you can reach us there, and you can get our buyers list as well. You go to our website, buyolsongroup.com. You can get on our buyers list, and you see any deal that comes out. And we'll talk about the different ways that you see deals in another episode. But definitely, if you're looking to do that, we do build rental portfolios for investors. That's our motto. That's what we do. And if you're looking to add to your portfolio or start anew, we would love to help you. Thank you for joining us today on the Active Turnkey podcast. Active Turnkey, the best way to buy rentals. See you guys. Olson Group Network makes no warranty, guarantee, or representation as to the accuracy or sufficiency of the information featured in this podcast. The information, opinions, and recommendations presented in this podcast are for general information only, and any reliance on the information provided in this podcast is done at your own risk. This podcast should not be considered professional advice. Unless specifically stated otherwise, Olson Group Network does not endorse, approve, recommend, or certify any information, product, process, service, or organization presented or mentioned in this podcast, and information from this podcast should not be referenced in any way to imply such approval or endorsement. Any third-party materials or content of any third-party site referenced in this podcast do not necessarily reflect the opinions, standards, or policies of Olson Group Network. Olson Group Network assumes no responsibility or liability for the accuracy or completeness of the content contained in third-party materials or on third-party sites referenced in this podcast, or the compliance with the applicable laws of such materials and/or links referenced herein.